Two sheriff's deputies stood in my own parking lot with a clipboard, telling me I had 10 minutes to clear my toolbox out of a building I built with my own hands back in 1991. Behind them, a flatbed truck was already backed up to my loading dock, ready to haul off the CNC mill I financed with a home equity loan the year my first wife left me. 33 years of grease under my fingernails, and a man in a golf shirt stood behind those deputies holding a folder that said, on paper, none of it was mine anymore. My name's Walt. I'm 61 years old. I ran a machine shop on the edge of Elyria, Ohio, making precision parts for anybody who needed something machined right the first time. I started it in a rented garage bay with a used lathe I bought at an estate sale. Never had kids of my own. My sister Carol has one son, Dennis, and from the time he was 19 I treated him like the son I never got. Taught him to read a micrometer before he was old enough to legally drink. 15 years ago I made him my partner, because a shop like mine isn't worth much if there's nobody left to hand it to. That's the whole stake right there before anything else happens. Not just a building. 33 years of my life, and the only piece of legacy I had left to give to family. The first sign was small enough to ignore. A supplier called to confirm a change of remittance address on our account. I hadn't changed it. I figured it was a clerical error on their end and let it go. 2 weeks later, my old bookkeeper, Ruthie, retired 6 years by then, called me out of nowhere. She'd run into another notary in town who mentioned notarizing an amended operating agreement for the shop. Ruthie had handled every piece of our paperwork for 20 straight years. Nobody had called her for this one. That bothered her enough to pick up the phone. I asked Dennis about it over dinner that Sunday. He said it was just the new accounting software cleaning up old files. Dennis was practically my own kid. The thought of doubting him made me feel sick, so I put it away and went back to the shop floor Monday morning. Trust in a family business is like the load-bearing wall in a house you've lived in your whole life. You never think about it, you never check it, you just walk past it every single day, until somebody tells you it's already been quietly cut through, and you're standing in a house that isn't holding itself up the way you always believed it was. That word, amended, sat in my chest for a full week anyway. So one Saturday I pulled an old fireproof box down from a shelf in my garage, one I hadn't opened since the shop's 10th anniversary. Inside was the original partnership agreement, the one I'd written myself across a lawyer's desk, back when I still didn't trust anybody fully with money. I'd put in one clause because of a bad handshake deal with a cousin years earlier. No change in ownership, ever, without unanimous written consent, signed in person, in front of a notary we both knew personally. The next morning I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled the amended agreement on file. My name was on it. My signature was on it. Except it wasn't my signature. Close. But the W leaned the wrong direction, something my hand has never once done in 40 years of signing my own name. And it was notarized on a Tuesday. I could prove, receipt in hand, I was 300 miles away at a fishing cabin in Michigan with my brother-in-law. A signature is supposed to be a man's word turned into ink. Somebody had taken my word, forged it into a lie, and filed that lie at the courthouse like it was the truth. I brought the box to an attorney named Diane Kessler, who'd handled a supplier dispute for me years before. She brought in a forensic document examiner who confirmed it inside of 10 minutes. Not my signature, notarized by a notary with no record of ever meeting me in person. Here's what reframed the whole thing. While we sat there, Diane pulled the county's plat records. 2 months before those deputies ever showed up in my parking lot, Dennis, using that forged ownership change, had already signed a preliminary sale agreement for the land under my shop. A new highway interchange was going in half a mile down the road, and the ground under my machines had quietly become worth more than the business itself. He wasn't easing me toward retirement like I'd thought. He was closing a sale on land I'd owned since before he was born, and my own eviction was just step one of clearing me out of the paperwork. Diane filed an emergency injunction that froze the land sale by that Friday. Because my original clause required a unanimous consent that never happened, the amended agreement was void from the day it was signed, which meant, on paper, none of it had ever legally changed hands at all. The fraud complaint went to the county prosecutor with the hotel and fishing cabin receipts attached. My sister Carol didn't believe any of it until Diane laid that cabin receipt next to the notary's date right in front of her. She didn't say much. She looked at her son's signature on the sale agreement for a long time, then looked at me and told me to do whatever the lawyer said needed doing. Dennis took a plea: probation, restitution, and his name off every document at that shop for good. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to see that part to know it was over. I reopened 6 weeks after those deputies stood in my lot. I called back the 2 guys Dennis had let go to cut costs. First thing I did before we ran a single part was frame the original 1991 partnership agreement, my handwriting, my real signature, and hang it on the office wall above the desk where I sign every check now. I still keep that fireproof box on a shelf behind my desk, right where I can see it every single morning, because a man should never have to prove his own name twice. So let me ask you this. If your signature ever showed up somewhere you never signed, would you have kept the one receipt that could prove where you really were?